membership, both our current members and those who are potential members of Historic Harrisburg. It's going to be entirely an electronic outreach campaign designed by Joanna Hunt, who is our all-purpose director of many things here at Historic Harrisburg Association. You're going to see this graphic coming out in social media and in emails and so forth, and that will tell you more about it. So when you see that, that's what that is, and it's an endeavor to develop and expand our reach and our support and the number of members that are involved in Historic Harrisburg Association. Also, we've got a couple of events coming up during the summer, which you want to be aware of. On Wednesday, August 14th, we will be having our annual Pillar Party. That is for anybody who's a member at the Pillar level and above, and many of you in the room I know fit that description. That is going to be at the residence of Mark Karowski, who is a longtime member and supporter of Historic Harrisburg. His house on Front Street is a really amazing rehab older house with stunning interior decor and modern furniture and so forth. It'll be a great, and he throws a good party. So we know that'll be something you won't want to miss on the 14th of August. Then on the 16th of August, Friday, right here at Historic Harrisburg, we will be co-hosting with the Art Association of Harrisburg one of their summer soirees. The Art Association has 3 or 4 soirees every summer at various different places around town, private homeowners and institutional buildings. And this is the second year that the Resource Center has agreed to be a co-host with me kind of as the co-host with Robert Potter of the Art Association to promote the Art Association and sell their art and display their art in our Dr. David Brunstein gallery out there, which you all walk through to come here tonight, and which I encourage you to see our current exhibit, which is up until then, and that's titled Treasures from Our Vault. And these are works of one kind or another that have been here in the ownership of Historic Harrisburg Association. Have they been part of prior exhibits, but they've never been pulled together as an exhibit of interesting and diverse, familiar and unfamiliar landmarks and other attractions around Harrisburg and beyond. So feel free to look at that. The exhibit on the teller line, if you have time to see it, is our City Beautiful 2.0 exhibit, which Deb Stewart curated a couple of years ago, funded by the Capital Region Water. And we're going to be doing an event with Capital Region Water here, actually on July 19th, I believe, for Third in the Berg, to talk about their latest initiatives to enhance stormwater runoff and improving the quality of water that goes into the Susquehanna and so forth. So that's on Friday, July 19th, I believe. So, and that's a free event. So those are our summer highlights. We'll have a big calendar starting after Labor Day in the fall. You'll hear more about that in the coming months. Meanwhile, I want to introduce tonight's speaker, Brad Jones, the CEO of Harristown. Brad has been CEO of that organization for about half of its 50-year history. And he follows in the footsteps of a number of distinguished leaders who have led Harristown and subsequently the revitalization of downtown Harrisburg, which was seen as an urgent necessity in the mid-1970s. The Greater Harrisburg movement was established, I will tell you more about this, to come up with ways to help turn around downtown Harrisburg. Harristown was the organization created to do that, and it's approached that goal in a number of different ways. But in recent years, particularly under Brad Jones's leadership in the last couple of decades, there's been heavy emphasis on historic preservation, and that includes heavy emphasis on residential rehab in downtown Harrisburg, which for many years almost nobody was living in downtown Harrisburg. Now it's booming. You rehab a space for an apartment and you find a renter the very next day. I think, Brad, I'm going to let you tell the story of Ashley Chris, because that made the newspaper a couple of weeks ago. But without further ado, please welcome Brad Jones.
When I came down here to the center for a presentation, I thought maybe it had been switched, David, to Midtown Scholar, because I saw there was a big line of people going all the way back down to Al's Bar and Grill, and I thought, well, geez, people were getting in line early for this presentation. Turns out there's a famous mystery writer who is speaking tonight at Midtown Scholar, so I guess you guys drew the short straw, so it's nice of you to come out.
We can line up for
I
if you
have
want.
I have no mystery novels to provide for you all, but it is a pleasure to be here. David, thank you for the invitation. There's nothing I enjoy more than getting together with a group of members and friends from Historic Harrisburg Association. Many friends who I've worked with over the years. My close and dear friend Tom Dar, and Tom and I walked through a project together when he was running the Judicial Center project. What seems like 100 years ago, but it was probably only 20, Tom. 15, yeah. So your project took a little longer to build than the one I was bringing through at the time. So anyhow, as David pointed out, I am the James Madison of Harristown, the fourth president of the corporation that was formed in 1974, basically to revitalize and rebuild and redevelop downtown Harrisburg. I see many of you are in possession of our, I think, about 47-page book that I would like to draw your attention to. If you haven't gotten one, I encourage you to get one. We have plenty. And really what we wanted to do was capture our 50-year anniversary, and we were lucky enough to have Jeb Stewart serve as one of our editors here for this book. But what it does is it walks you through from the beginning in the late 60s and early 70s when Harristown was formed as a way to try to take care of what was viewed as a major community problem in the city and in the downtown. And that problem was really stemming from both just disinvestment in the city, but also the state itself actually moving their own offices out of the city into other communities. So we had a celebration that some of you I know have participated in on May 17th to sort of celebrate our anniversary. But we had a video there from a gentleman who some of you may know, Ron Lynch, who was the secretary of the Department of General Services during the Shapp administration. And after the founders of Harristown put together the corporation in the early 1970s, there was a big movement to provide the initial first project, and that was Strawberry Square and 333 Market. And it needed support from the administration to sign long-term leases and provide some seed capital through the city. And Ron Lynch, who appears on this video, who's got to be in his mid to late 80s now, but he was the secretary of the Department of General Services under Governor Shapp, and we have him on video in this story where he basically discusses how he got a call from Governor Shapp in his car phone in the 70s, and he's explaining that the car phone was about this big, right? It was like a, almost as big as the car itself, and he said he gets a call from, the governor. Yeah, hi, how you doing, Governor? Yeah, what can I do for you? And the governor said, I got this Harristown thing. I don't know what to do with it. Should I sign these deals? I don't know what to do, Ron. And Ron goes, Governor, you're going to need to do something for Harrisburg. You've done things for Pittsburgh. You've done things for Philadelphia. Now it's time to do something for Harrisburg. And you should sign these leases. He hung up the phone, and the governor signed it. So it was kind of one of those classic moments. When I see Ron Lynch, he usually says to me, Brad, you're the reason I'm the reason you're all here. And he's right. So it's been an interesting transition. I guess the simplistic way I would describe, sort of the 50 years of Harristown is that in the first 25 years, our focus was really on big urban development projects, many of them new construction. Some now, you know, in 50 years later, may look back and say maybe we've done things differently. But in the 70s and 80s, when Strawberry Square was built and 333 Market Street was built, and those were sort of our big signature projects in the early 70s. And then later, as our company progressed, you know, we looked at things much differently, as David was sort of describing. And the first 25 years, I think, was about big urban development projects like the parking garages, Strawberry Square, 333 Market, Whitaker Center for Science and the Arts, and then the Harrisburg Hilton, which was probably our most significant, impactful project. And then the next 25 were really completely different. And you know, so I think there's, and I've been with the company for almost half of the history, which is kind of shocking, because I'm still only 30 years old. So, but you know, Jeb only is 40, so you know, that's, I'm just trying to keep up with you. And so I think the key is, so much has changed in the city in this 50 years. And so you start in the book and you look and see, you know, sort of from boom to bust, like this was the place to shop, this was the place to you know, to visit, to come out for a big day, to have a big night on the town. So many things had fallen away in the 70s, and to create such an urgent need for our company, which was formed as a private, not-for-profit, so private, not-for-profit, self-perpetuating board, basically to try to tackle some of these issues, but in partnership with the government. Because I think the feeling was, look, if we don't form something to do all these projects and fix all these problems, then there's not going to be, the government's going to get stuck with fixing them anyways. So why not form a more nimble agency that's able to do things without a lot of bureaucracy and with a little more fluidity in its execution. And so, as we've gone through our first 25 years of big projects, you know, now here we are, you know, looking at a lot of things much differently. And I will say, sort of, with the first 25 years being, you know, these bigger, very impactful, I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects, and then really what is more, I'll say, community projects and more smaller row building renovations and neighborhood renovations, which has been really the second 25 years, and neighborhood making and place making and those kind of things. And so as you walk through the book, you'll sort of see that there's really there's a pretty clear transition after we get through. By the way, this is my favorite picture right here. If you get to let's see, page 25, picture of Jeb looking down the model. He looks just the same today. He's looking down the Harristown model because Jeb was working at the city at the time, right? City clerk. City council. Yeah.
Not a single gray hair in his mustache.
Not even. So he had to sell this 50-acre plan, which was put together as part of the Harristown plan, a 50-acre redevelopment plan, right, Jeb? Yes. And there's a little picture of the plan in here somewhere as well that shows you the sort of geography. So, you know, you think about, you know, 50 acres, and people ask me all the time, like, oh, well, can you guys go to Midtown, or can you go develop in Camp Hill, or things like that? And I said, you know, we're not bound by that geography any longer. As Jeff knows quite well, in the early days, we had a redevelopment plan that he was trying to sell in that picture, 50 acres, and basically from 1976 to 2016, I think it was a 40-year redevelopment plan, and it officially allowed, you know, inside those borders, we had eminent domain powers, which was, you know, is kind of scary today. I don't think we would ever use eminent domain, even if we had it today. Eminent domain was a different thing back then, and we did use eminent domain powers apparently long before I got to the company. But it is, you know, that is a whole nother the world has changed a lot with regard to how eminent domain is done and its view by the public, I think, as well. So if you walk into sort of, you get past the Hilton Hotel in this, and you know, that is sort of the transition point, I think, where you start to look at, you know, after the Hilton and after the Whitaker Center, we started to look at things much differently. Like, look, we've got a lot of neighborhood and historic preservation and, you know, the saving the fabric of a lot of these building neighborhoods. And that's really what you see in the second half of this book, which is the neighborhood developments in the south of Market, and you know, all the historic rehabs that we've been motivated by the good work of HHA, who somewhere along the line, David, you guys changed your mission statement. I know it was like 10 years ago, to add in urban revitalization, right?
Yeah.
Which I think was really a great addition, and I know it inspired us, you know, to say that's what we do, you know, and we should be all working together.
Our missions align.
Yeah, they're very much in alignment, and so I think, you know, as we worked our way through the '90s and into the 2000s, we really sort of buckled down on what can we do to preserve the fabric of the downtown. And we are so fortunate to have such great fabric. I mean, yes, do we tear things down that we shouldn't have? Absolutely. I mean, there's lots of things we probably regret, but there's so much that we have that is still worth saving and just requires a little more work on the renovation. I was just at a Pennsylvania Downtown Conference this morning in York, and there was a friend of mine there from Wilkes-Barre, and he said, yeah, he was remarking, like, we tore everything down in Wilkes-Barre. Like, we tore most of the good stuff down. And he was kind of lamenting about how sad he was. He was, you know, looking at what's in York and Harrisburg and Lancaster and just, you know, wishing that they had not taken some of the turns that they had taken there. But I want to just sort of point out that the other thing that I think has been really important in this 25-year division is that right around the split of, you know, after the 25th year or so, we got together as a board and we said, look, we gotta, you know, figure out what our game plan is for the next, you know, 25 years. And we really decided we were gonna focus on eds, beds, and meds. And that was gonna be, you know, partnering with educational institutions, you know, partnering with the medical, you know, corridor, in this case mostly UPMC now, but at that time was Pinnacle Health, and then trying to focus on growing the residential population in the downtown, which, you know, was virtually nothing when we started doing this. And now I think you're seeing, if you look at the next census, I think you'll see quite a bit of growth both in Midtown and downtown with regard to a lot of residential development. So, and I think you have to also look through and see the partnerships with the educational institutions and just how significant that has been with regard to the growth and the development of Harrisburg University, which, you know, is somewhat of a miraculous creation that has really been a boom for the downtown in a very unique and different kind of institution. Very no departments, of no faculty tenure, you know, very entrepreneurial, not traditionally undergraduate. And then, you know, you've got things like the Capillary School for the Arts, which has been a great addition to the downtown. You've got SciTech High, which is where, you know, Harrisburg University first started it on Market Street. And, you know, you have really, I think, an evolution of educational partners. And now this medical corridor with UPMC, I mean, you can't, this week we're going to be celebrating the sponsorship of UPMC with our clock box, which is where the clock used to be in Strawberry Square, and the stage. And UPMC is now, you know, kind of sponsoring almost everything in the city. They've been a tremendous partner to the downtown, to the city. But this eds, beds, and meds corridor has really been a big focus of ours. And, you know, I want this to be sort of an interactive discussion, so I'm gonna try to summarize some of this. But I think, you know, what we see in terms of the last 15 years of our work, you know, with all this historic preservation and, you know, the development of these residential units in these buildings, you know, you look at what's going on right now with regard to the commercial office market, which is probably the worst commercial office market that we may have seen in our lifetimes, right? And somebody asked me, I think it was Mark, you asked me how many square feet I think was on the market in terms of office, unoccupied square feet of office in the downtown. It's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 300,000 feet. It may be more if you count some other buildings like the old federal courthouse and things like that. So we've got a lot of work to do in the next 50 years, but certainly the next 10 years, I think there's a real opportunity to, so what you're seeing now is that with all these office leases coming out, and there's other factors here that I'll leave aside, but we can talk about in question and answer. But what you see is these office buildings are now gonna be up for sale. I get a call at least once a week, somebody call me and say, hey, this office building's coming up for sale, do you guys wanna buy it? And I said, you know, that I'd like to, but you're the 10th call I've gotten in the last month, right? So there are all these different buildings, and they're fantastic buildings. Like they're buildings where you go, yes, that would make a great residential conversion, but you can't do everything, right? And you know, it's a tough time to do renovations and construction, with construction costs being high, interest rates being high. But I think if you look at where this city and this downtown are going, in the next 10 years, if we're able to make more of that residential, then we might have a really interesting and different city, which has heretofore been all about work, right? It's been work, and there's a little bit of live down here, and now we're sort of pulling that down to where it's going to be more live, maybe a little less work, and that has been obviously dramatically accelerated by the pandemic and the work from home. It's worth mentioning that I think, you know, the work from home thing has certainly accelerated the pace of people, you know, selling their office buildings for sure. But it's, you know, it's also, I think I like to view things as, you know, there's a you know, an opportunity in everything that happens. And the opportunity for us, I think, is that we have the chance to maybe take a lot of these just absolutely gorgeous historic buildings and turn those into more living spaces, like things that we've done. I know Ashley lives in probably one of our more interesting apartments. I remember there's been a nice article, and she was kind enough to say some nice things about some of the work we had done. But the truth is that, you know, this is work we enjoy. It's work we're very proud of. We're excited to do a lot more in the future, but we also, I think, recognize that, you know, the next couple of years are going to be pretty tough. So in order to get to a much greater density of people in the downtown, we're gonna have a little bit of heartache as we watch some of that economic power of office tenancy leave the city. And that is, you know, it's a little harder to replace with residential. It's possible, but it just takes a little more of it, and it's going to take a lot more capital to put that together as well. But I think, you know, just sort of to get to sort of the discussion part of this, I want to encourage everybody to take a look if you haven't. We literally tried to put everything in there that we could think of that we'd ever done. And keep it within reason of, you know, not just so we wouldn't bore you to death. But at the back, my favorite part, because I'm a project geek, is the appendix here that talks about all the major projects we've done, and then what our role was, what the cost of the project was, who were some of our partners, and then I think the other, thing that's interesting here is just sort of we have every board member listed in here as well from the beginning, and it's a fascinating list of kind of rock stars of Harrisburg, right? I mean, these folks who sacrificed their time and effort and to serve with us, and that continues. So the other thing I would have loved to bring today, but we just didn't have enough of it. We did get a 50th anniversary beer produced by Boneshire. Some of you have a 4-pack of that in your refrigerator. If
Not anymore.
it didn't last long, probably, right? But we did run out of most of that beer. But it's such a big hit, maybe we'll make another batch. So I'm going to stop there and just because I want to have a discussion. I know there's a lot of folks in here who know a lot more about this city than I do, and I want to be respectful of letting them participate in the question and answer as well.
Question for Brad.
I'd just like to comment on the old City Hall
Yeah,
deal,
sure.
as it were.
Yeah.
Because that was at the very beginning when we were going through what buildings should be off the demolition list and what buildings should be preserved.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a great controversy about Old City Hall, because as you know, the city had to commit along with the state and Bell Telephone at the time
Right.
to build a new City Hall. And that was,
Yeah.
of course, one of the other major.
Yes, it was. I missed that one in my summary, but you are correct. And Old City Hall stands the test of time
It
as a
does.
tremendous residential project here for the downtown.
That's right, and at the time, the question was, get it off the demolition list, because it was, and Lou Mylan was, of course, executive director of the redevelopment
Right.
authority at the time, and there were issues about that.
Mm-hmm.
Got it off, and then the city, of course, put out an RFP, because they were moving to the new building, and Historic Landmarks for Living.
Yep.
Was the successful, and that was the first, historic preservation market rate apartment project that occurred downtown in the wake and due to the efforts of Harristown, one way or the other. So I just wanted to comment on that if I could.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great point. I mean, in the original sort of, kind of what we refer to as Moses' tablets of Harristown, there's I have this tattered book in my office that's all dog-eared and coffee spilled all over it. And it's got all the things that we were supposed to do in the master plan. You remember that plan, Jeff. And, there were some things you did and some things you did almost exactly like we were in the plan, like the hotel and like the Whitaker Center and Strawberry Square and garages and things. And then there was all these apartments that we were supposed to build. We didn't build any of them until, well, we participated in the project you're talking about. We were the developer of Old City Hall. And we did a couple of projects down in South Harrisburg as a facilitator on, Mulberry Street Station and Washington Square.
Right.
And that was it. And we were supposed to build 2,000 apartments, and I said, we gotta get to that part, right? Let's get to that. So that's why we sort of started that in the, the turn of 2000.
Right.
So,
Do you know what the status is of the former federal office building? That was to be converted to residential. Is that still alive, do you know?
as far as I know, it is. Yeah, I mean, the story of the former federal office building is an interesting one so far, even in that I don't know what the rest of you guys thought, but I wasn't sure anybody would buy that building, right? Because it's a 250,000 square foot building with a lot of courtrooms and asbestos and 30, 40, $50 million renovation. But there were 3 buyers at a $10 million level, and the original first buyer was, I think, just a little over $10 million. And then this guy, the second guy, he bought it for $13 million. He's taken it through land development, and he's just recently received some additional monies from the city for, I think, some affordable housing part of the project, so we'll see. Would it be wonderful if he was able to do that? Yeah, absolutely.
Big time.
I mean, every project that we can get done in the city and in the downtown, in my opinion, is mostly almost always additive. Sometimes it's, you know, you gotta work to get to a better solution, but, we need that kind of outside investment. That's been hard to find.
Other questions? I think Steve Wonders, did you have a question?
Chris, or Steve. Brad, you and I have talked, I feel like when I run into you, we end up talking about retail.
Yeah.
And as it's moved down the list, and particularly the focus on, as you say, ed, beds and meds.
Yep.
We know that downtown retail is tough, that era is mostly gone. But yet, you know, we go to places, we travel, we go to destinations where there's some thriving retail. In your internal discussions with your own company leadership and board, does anybody even talk about retail, kind of like a far off thing on the horizon? Is it anywhere on the radar screen?
No, I'm glad you mentioned it, Chris. That's why I wanted to, I knew I'd miss a lot of stuff here in the overview. So retail is, you know, about 10 years ago, I put together this presentation for our board that basically had a block face of everything we own and all the first floor, you know, spaces that were vacant or about to be vacant or occupied. And it was basically the retail spaces, right? And I called it, I thought I was really being clever, I called it the retaliation campaign. Anyhow, so the idea was we were gonna go and attack this thing, right? And try to really fill these retail spaces up with, you know, viable businesses. And I will say we mostly failed on that for about the first 10 years, but I think in the last couple of years, and I will attribute some of this to our new broker relationship with Bennett Williams, who's been absolutely wonderful, helping us find small businesses. And in many cases, most cases, and we signed 16 leases, I think, last year for first floor spaces. So, you know, and they're not all like sort of, you know, traditional retail, but maybe services, right? Business services, things like, you know, now a dog groomer downtown, which I know some of you take your dog to, you know, our new groomer
Unleashed,
there.
I think it's called Unleashed.
Unleashed,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So, and we have, you know, a new vintage store downtown called Found Collab. You can easily find it now because we have a brand new Welcome to Soma sign that is lighted, and at the bottom of the sign is Found Collab's vintage store. Probably one of the more interesting stores in the city, I think. And that was a small store that we moved down to the former Walker's Art and Framing. But we've seen, I think coming out of the pandemic, we've seen sort of, I'll say these themes, to focus on retail. The small business community is alive and well. Lots and lots of people came out of COVID and said, I want to start my own business, right? So that's been great. Now, you know, are they still fickle and a little bit, you know, volatile? Yeah, you bet. But we've been doing well on small storefront leases. It's things that I would have never, in my wildest dreams, thought we would have found. Like we have a puppet show in Strawberry Square right now. I know, you can't make this up, right? But 6 shows a day, 6 days a week. And in an old retail store, right behind, you know, the atrium. And the part I love about it is that the theme for the show is called Strawberry Square Finds a New Friend. I thought, does it get any better than that? So retail's doing well. I mean, in the sense that there's lots of deals to be done. I think we're pretty good at doing those deals because we can build the spaces out quickly and get people in there and try to help them succeed. But also coming out of the pandemic, I think we saw that the arts community was picking up and doing pretty well as well. The residential's doing very well, and then office market stays. Right, so those are the themes I see for, you know, sort of post-COVID, themes, but I think what we've not been able to find yet, Chris, is big restaurant footprints in the downtown, right? So we've signed a couple of small restaurant deals, and we're about to announce, I hope, 2 more restaurant deals any minute, that you will recognize, and I think be pleased by, particularly you, Ashley. The first floor of your building.
Starbucks?
Well,
Come on.
but I think, the bigger, more than 2,000 feet have been tough. And we were just down at the Yorktown Hotel this morning, and that's a $50 million project, that they pulled off down there, and they have a first floor restaurant. If you ever ate at the Yorktown, the old restaurant, that space is a shell, and they're trying to find a new restaurateur for that, and they're really struggling with it. And I think York and Harrisburg, share a lot of some of the same metrics. So those are I think the holes are food and beverage, and I know many people have said, when are we gonna get back sort of the full restaurant community that we had here? And I think it's gonna take a little time. I think we'll get there.
Am I safe to assume that the loss of downtown daytime workers is greater than the gain of residents at this point? We haven't had a net
Yes.
gain in terms of
Yes. If you're
population.
saying that the loss of the downtown workers, there were almost 30,000 people who used to get up every morning and come to the office, which was mostly in Harrisburg. And now on a given day, those same, folks are probably, on a good day, probably 5,000 people. Yeah, so
That doesn't include state.
no, that's what I'm saying, just the state. If you just take the state, that
Capital complex?
well, I'm saying state offices, L&I, all that stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So,
Wow.
so it's dramatic, and I don't think people understand just how dramatic it is. People come to work once a month sometimes, maybe a couple times a week, depends on your agency. It's all over the place, but the long, the impact is huge. So it'll take us a while to balance that out. If this is what normal looks like, then yeah, we're gonna have to build a lot more residences, and it won't have the same impact. You have an office building with 1,000 people, and you sit outside that office building during the day, and you watch it, and people will be coming in and out all day, right? And you take a residential building that's fully occupied, you sit outside, maybe with 50 units, or 75 units, and you'll see, people trickle in and out. They just don't have quite the same amount of economic power, so it takes more of it. That make sense?
Sure, no, it's a fascinating dynamic.
Yeah.
And where you sit, I imagine, I don't mean to dominate, I imagine that it's a one step forward, 2 step back
Yeah.
scenario quite often. I met you 20 plus years ago. We talked about all kind of things, and then it was the recession, and then it's the other things, and the pandemic, and so many external forces when you're already struggling to deal with just the societal trend of people not going downtown.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's really tough.
Third questions. Brad, go ahead.
What's the Commonwealth's current plan about bringing people back in? Is there a plan?
Look, we were told that this is it. Like, what you see is what you get. Like, so the people that came back that are working 3 days a week, which is mostly management, that's what they're doing. The rest of the line worker, I say line's not the right word, but sort of rank and file are mostly working from home, and maybe they might come in once a month. And I don't mean, Frank, I know you visit the LCD a lot. It's pretty vacant, right?
No one's home.
There's nobody home. They gave up the parking lot next door, right? That they sold, that lease on the parking lot that was next to Zero Day. I think they gave that back.
Really?
There's nowhere to park. And if you go in the parking garages during the day, which is mostly state lease deals, right? because the state leased all these parking spaces, which is a whole nother presentation. But, yeah, I mean, there's no one in the garages, right? So, so there's,
And that affects revenue of the city, right?
yes, it has a, yes,
In addition to Harris.
yes,
Well,
Yes.
good.
yes.
I have a lot of things to say on Triton.
Sure,
But I
sure.
see that Governor Shack is trying,
Shapiro.
trying to get a lot of state agencies to demand that they come back to work downtown. Number one, I heard about that, and, also, I don't think you're giving Harristown enough credit that it's because you're so young. That before you came along, the flood that hit this city was, Harristown is like number one job for years.
That's right.
And, that was a big crime.
Yeah, yeah, the flood is really the turning point here in the beginning of this, which, all the pictures of the flood, and you're absolutely right. I mean, that was the point where everybody said, okay, we gotta do something here. This is just not gonna work, right? So, Mark's family, one of the most rewarding projects we did, was the Santana's Restaurant down at the Fox on Washington. And there's a picture in here of your restaurant underwater, Mark.
Yeah, so
And we were told, when we bought that building, from the hospital, after it had sat vacant for 30 years, thankfully, to David and your teams, you guys managed to keep them from tearing that down. And then one day, they were nice enough to see, you guys wanna take a whack at that, and I said, absolutely, I was in there the next day. But that building was, we met the entire Santana family. It was great. And heard all the great stories, and then your, I guess it was your dad who had the wine, right? Was that
that's my uncle.
your
Yeah.
uncle? Yeah.
See, my great grandfather's wine press was in the basement there at some
Yeah.
point.
Yep. We gave you all the things that you wanted from the basement.
It was cool. Thank you for doing
Yeah,
that.
that was a fantastic project, but the building doesn't look anything like it does today, does it? I mean, in this picture, it's interesting. I mean, it has its features, but it's just, but the gravity of this flood in the picture is emphasized by the fact that we have, this is not in the floodplain. So that's what the insurance, or the, what is it?
100-year flood.
Yeah, the 100-year, yes, not in the 100-year floodplain, thank you. But apparently.
Yeah.
Here's the evidence.
72 was the 500-year flood.
Right. Because if you went just down the street.
One of my biggest concerns is, I spent the first 22 years of my life in Susquehanna Township above Williamton High School, and then I referred as I got smart and moved into the city. And I've been there ever since, and I love living here. But at some point, I'm no longer gonna be able to go 3 stories in my house.
Right.
And my biggest concern is all these wonderful new apartments,
Mhm.
they're 1 bedroom.
Yep.
And those of us that are older, we need a bedroom and a den, and there are none. And I keep hearing they can't do that, because in economic reasons, people won't get them. That's crap. I know people in this city who are quite well off and don't wanna live.
Mhm.
I'm not one of them, but I know some of them. And I don't know why they can't put 2-bedroom apartments in these new places. Everything's key to young people. I'm not knocking young people. I was one once myself. But there's no place for people my age and older to move to, with the exception of the Parkway and the one at Harris in front. I feel sad because I really don't want to leave the city.
So we do have a whole bunch of 2-bedroom apartments, okay? And many of those complexes have elevators. If you look in here, I think there's a slide on the Ben Bar, which is on Pine Street. We've got a bunch of 2-bedroom apartments, and a bunch that are on the first floor as well. So we do not have any 3-bedroom apartments, but we do have some pretty big 2-bedroom apartments that are 1,200 square feet. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a small inventory of units that, we're looking at this very closely. I mean, we'd love to get more senior housing into the downtown. And there's been a lot of proposals. There's a big proposal at Willow Valley in Lancaster's doing like a 20-story building. Yeah. It hasn't broken ground yet, but the idea was to provide, you know, a really excellent level of amenities for, you know, sort of 55 and over. And we think that we have a project right now that we're trying to get off the ground at 112 Market Street, which is a 1940s, 1930s tower, 8 stories, almost on the river. We'd like to do about 45 units in there. We think maybe we're trying to see if we can find some senior housing developers to work with us for that. So you're absolutely right, there needs to be more product on the market.
Did you buy that building from the county?
We
Buy
did.
Blackstone building?
We did.
Former Blackstone.
Former Blackstone
Yeah,
building.
yeah.
I love going places with Chad, he's got all the answers.
My
My
other,
office is in there when I
Was
worked
it?
at the county,
Yeah, yeah.
my
Yeah,
other
yeah,
concern is.
the building is completely vacant now. They just moved Tri-County over to, Tri-County Planning over to Strawberry Square. So now we're all clear for the project.
We have time for about one more question.
Follow.
That's not-
Good, good.
Mark?
What's your guys' vision for the south side of Market Street between 2nd and 4th, where CVS,
Right.
Rite Aid, Eddie's Men and Shops?
Well, it's a great question, Mark, and I do have an answer. I'm not gonna be able to answer it completely, but, so we have 3 sites on Market Street right now that we're working on. One is the 112 Market Street, which is, you know, right across from the county courthouse. Now come across 2nd, and the old CVS, we had a plan for the CVS, that plan kind of went away, and we're trying to figure out what's the best, highest and best use for that building. We have a couple of iterations of some models there. I mean, maybe, you know, kind of like a food and beverage with entertainment, but also could be retail. I mean, it was a drugstore, right? Go way back to H.L. Green, right? H.L. Green, you see the G's on the, so, but there was 100 years worth of drugstore paraphernalia in the basement. But I do think it could be retail again, and the 2nd floor, we have a drawing for the 2nd floor for apartments. I don't know if that's the best idea or not. It's a little funky, but could we do it? Yeah, we could. And then the rest of this, we have a major project under development for the rest of that 300 block between, where the old Rite Aid used to be, 1-story Rite Aid. We're just assembling, we have under contract the pizza shop, the old Mama's Pizza, building, which,
That's
we
the
should-
missing tooth, right?
yeah, we needed to get that one, and, you know, it's funny, if you live long enough, you can get up most of these buildings. You just have to outlive the rest of the folks. So I made a deal with the guy who used to own that pizza shop in 2014 for the exact same price that we are purchasing it for 10 years later. Unfortunately, he passed away, and his widow is, so.
So it's everything between the Kunkel building and what's called the Seal building.
Correct,
Which is on the National
correct.
Register, which is the brownstone at
Correct.
the other end of the block.
Correct,
And you had a rendering for a mid-rise,
I did.
and we
I
ran
did.
that in the HHA newsletter a couple years ago.
You did, yes.
So
Yes, we
hopefully
have-
that's still alive, because
Yes,
that's some bad,
yeah,
that
big-
block is,
Yeah, it's a bad block,
It's a bad
it's
block.
falling apart, most of those buildings are not really, I mean, of any real significance historically, I mean,
right.
that 1-story
The one in
Rite
the
Aid
middle
is about the
is-
worst, right, that's sort of the last thing that, you know.
The one in the middle was a Chicken Tiddles, and it
Yes.
became Eddie's Men Shop.
Yes,
That dates to the mid-19th century, that's the only, quote, good
yes,
building in the
yes,
block. But when you look at the highest and
the
best
condition
use,
of that, yeah,
we can carpet that.
yep, yep.
On our
That
page.
is our plan
That's an
for a
unofficial
big
position of
project there,
HHA,
yes.
so.
So that could be all kinds of things,
Yeah.
but we have a couple things in particular in mind, but, we're not there yet.
Got it.
Do you know how many HU students live downtown?
About 600.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 500 to 600, mostly in the 2 buildings that Jeb mentioned, the Kunkel building, the Seal building, and then 335 Market, which was the old Governor's Hotel. Remember those? So those three
On the
buildings.
other side, 333 Market.
Yes,
Yeah, on the
yes,
corner.
and
Yeah.
then, Pennsylvania Place is also a place where a lot of the students live. Yeah.
Great. I'm gonna ask the final question, Brad. You were at the Pennsylvania Statewide Downtown Conference today. I'm wondering, are you hearing anything that is telling you that sets Harrisburg apart from other cities in Pennsylvania and beyond, or are there more similarities than differences?
I think with the third-class cities, we have a lot of similarities. You know, Scranton, Erie, Wilkes-Barre, right, Lancaster, York. What makes us different than that is obviously the Capitol complex, and that's the part that, when you say Nashville or Austin now, people don't really, not a lot of people today don't really know that, they don't think of that as the capital, right? It's Nashville. You go to Nashville. Is that the capital? Yeah, it is. Austin, you go to Austin. You go to Austin for other reasons. You don't go because it's the capital, right? So that's where I think we would love to get to, where you sort of forget about the capital. Not that you forget about the capital,
But something else is even
but
bigger.
it's a cool city without worrying about the capital. And that's the vision, I think, in the future.
This has been great, because we're all thinking about Harrisburg and its future and its possibilities, and I think we have to be optimists. And optimists have brought us these 50 years from where Harrisburg was to where we are today, and it can continue, and you're part of that, Brad. So thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for the inspiration.
I just want to do one more thing. There are so many of you in this room that have been part of this organization in a big way. I'd like to ask everybody who is a current or former board member of Historic Harrisburg Association to please stand up for a moment. Current or former board member. I know a lot of you have been on our board since. Look at that. We have a lot of great people who have made what we do possible, and our collaboration with Harristown, a whole different enterprise, but a sister enterprise in many respects, so thank you all. That concludes our program. We still have refreshments in the back. You're welcome to stick around and socialize and ask Brad more questions or whatever, because I think there's a lot of energy in the room tonight, and we're very grateful for that. So thank you all for coming.